We have to start, I think, with one important assumption. Humans and AI read and process information in a different way. It is hard to accept because, of course, as humans, we tend to look at other entities through our eyes. When we think about pets, we call them with the name of dear persons, and we are known for hugging trees and do all crazy stuff with entities around us, and to create everything in a world that we know. But when it comes to acquiring knowledge, humans typically work by distillation. So we spend decades of our life, and we go to schools, and we learn from teachers, and then we grow, and we start taking courses from mentors, and this process is slow. It is effective to some extent, but it's far from being linear, and it takes a long time. On the other side, a machine can transfer its weights immediately to another machine. So a digital intelligence has the capacity of replicating itself endlessly in no time. I can have 200 JSON across the cloud if I want to. I get
I don't think you would.
I would. Why not? I mean.
Oh, thank you very much. 200 JSON.
All with red shirts. All with red shirts. So okay. So the distillation works for human, but it's very slow, and machine, knowledge is encapsulated into these giant networks made of trillions of parameters, and they can be immediately transferred. Now, when acquiring new knowledge, we are biased, of course, so we're training machines with human knowledge, and I think this is kind of a problem, but that's what we had, right? I mean, we have created books, we have created artifacts of all sorts that can be consumed through the use of human language, and so we're training the machines with human language. We're training the machine with STEM, with mathematics, and everything that we have available, really. And I don't think this is correct, because we're creating, kind of a false replica of human beings, and that's creating a lot of confusion. We should actually focus on a new form of digital intelligence and train it with something different that, it's more synthetic than human-centered. This is also scary for us, because at least we're saying, hey, at least we're used for training the machine, so we have some use of it. But we know that there is this bitter effect of AI that is realizing that actually an AI can self-improve itself with synthetic knowledge, and it doesn't need our knowledge. But aside from that, a machine that learns, it needs a lot more of evidence, because it can process a lot more data. In fact, with a lot less connection in a digital brain, the capacity of storing information, it's unprecedented. There's no way to compare the ratio of connection in our brain and the ability to hold memories versus a digital intelligence. A digital intelligence with a fraction of the connections can hold in memory an incredible number of facts. And that means that when training a machine, or when making a machine aware of a specific concept, your product, your service, your brand values, your ethos, your DNA as an organization, we need to change gear. We can't just pretend that using the same approach that we've used for humans, we can convince a machine, because it's not going to work. In fact, quite interesting when Perplexity started to enable shopping. One of the well-known investor of Perplexity, that was Amazon, stopped completely Perplexity from accessing its store. Why was that? I mean, that's crazy, right? I mean, they invested in Perplexity, and they don't want Perplexity to buy from Amazon. Why is that? Right. Well, Amazon business model is designed around humans, and so and the fact that if I buy a red shirt, then maybe I end up in buying also a Hoover. And why we do that, we don't know. But I mean, Amazon has been streamlining this funnel and ensuring that human get through recommendation enticed to buy, from one product, another product, and then another product. But for a machine, that mechanism, these heuristics, just doesn't work. And so for Amazon, this is a threat for its core business model. And so they have to stop the bots and say, hey, only my AI can actually, run shopping on me, because it will otherwise destroy me. Because, maybe the red shirts, as a lower price, because we know that then Jason is going to buy also the Hoover. And but if the bot only buys the red shirt, then the business model no longer can sustain itself. So back to us, because the machine have a complete different way of processing information, and they need more. We need to accept that they need more. Why? Because they need to dissect. They do have more time. They have more memories. And so they can use these memories extensively in order to accomplish their goal. And this is the scary part. I mean, also this poses the so-called existential threat of AI, is the fact that if we are letting a machine fulfill a goal, then this goal is going to be broken down in sub-goals, and these sub-goals might be scary. Because maybe in order to buy the red shirt, I would I don't know, destroy a forest, because I still need to buy the red shirt. But to buy it, maybe I destroy a forest. That's a sub goal of buying the shirt, and that's a scary part. But back to us, we need to create evidence packs. We need to create these evidence packs. So having, for example, a product advertised on a product page is no longer enough. We need, the buying guide. We need, someone else to provide, additional factual information or reviews. And again, we need contradictions. AIs needs contradictions. So it needs to see one side and the opposite side, because he has the ability to process, and because he needs to find trust. Also, AI needs trust. He needs to understand if it's making the right decision or not.
And that idea that trust comes from the evidence, the corroboration in a positive sense, and the contradiction is something relatively new.
It is, especially the contradiction part, because we were used, again, as we said before, we were used to sustain statement that are aligned, and after a certain threshold, they become a fact that everyone has to accept. But there's nothing like that in AI, because there's no conscience at the end in the machine. That's also another aspect.
Wow. Okay. Oh dear. All right. So we're getting into a very existential question here. The interesting thing there then is that when I'm preparing my content and giving it out or pushing it out onto the internet for the machines in one way or another, do I need to give the contradictory or the opposite point of view every time? Or is that something that I would expect the machine to find elsewhere, and the machine indeed would expect to find elsewhere?
So I think that you need to provide pathways, because that's what I see as relevant today for businesses. We need to increase the quality of the data and the content that we deliver, so that we can provide more evidence. We can also provide pathways to find, different viewpoints that can extend and broaden the vision that we might have. So there is a graph internal that contains, these combination of data and content that creates the context, the ontological core of your organization. And then you can create pathways that bring the machine to find contradictory evidence or different point of view that can, sustain a decision in your direction.
And it would be better for you to prepare that pathway and control to a certain extent the contradiction rather than letting the machine go and find its own.
Yeah, because the case here, and it's been proven in these kind of early days of the agentic commerce, is that if the machine doesn't find enough evidence, it's not going to trust the decision. Because again, for a human, an important brand, let's say famous bank name, it is sign of truth. I mean, I trust the brand. I know the brand. I know the history of the brand. I know the storytelling of the brand. I don't know. I go and get the loan. I'm not going to go. Of course, when we take a loan, it's a life decision. So we spend time before deciding, where to take a loan. But as scrupulous as we can be, we have 1/10, even less, of the capacity of a machine to process alternatives and to pose question. And we have, as machine, we have no respect of brand equity and value, because at the end we're just comparing apples with apples. We don't know the importance of the brand storytelling and brand value. We haven't lived. We're not embodied. As agents, we're not embodied. We have no physical experience.
So how does an agent judge a brand then? I mean, sorry, just before that question, I just wanted to point out that, in fact, as a human being, if there is no contradiction to the information I'm seeing, I don't trust it. So I'm on the same boat as an agent. But the second question is, how do you get an agent to trust your brand then? Is it to have very consistent information in a positive way, but also have the contradictory information in as controlled a way as you can?
I think that there are different layers, but you have a consistent ontological core. So your information is it's straightforward and it's consistent across the different representation. But you also exist within the contradictions. It's like when creating a Wikipedia article of a corporate brand, you expect to have that paragraph about contradictions or legal issues or past legal issues, because if it doesn't exist, it means that there's been a manipulation, and therefore there's no trust. Authenticity comes from reality, and reality sucks in some cases. I mean, there's always something that didn't work the way it was expected. Otherwise, it's not real.
Right. That was incredibly philosophical until you said reality sucks. But let's come back to the more business aspect. So practically speaking, as a business, I've got a lot of data and a lot of information within my business that currently I'm not exploiting. Reviews you were talking about, that I'm not pushing through and making it visible and accessible to the machines. What are the concrete steps we can take as businesses to what I would call codify the internal differentiator data that we have and give it to the machines?
So I have a practical approach.
Brilliant.
And I usually start by probing open source and open weight models by looking at different angles of the brand. There is a technique that Anthropic introduced some time ago called Sparse Autoencoder that allow us to see what neurons connections are triggering when I ask what is Kalicube good about, or when I ask how helpful can be Jason Barner to grow my business. When I ask these questions, some connection activate inside a model, and we can now look at these sparks. And for example, if we mention the brand WordLift, what connection spark? RDF, which is the format that we use for our knowledge graph, and SEO. These are the sparks, the neurons, the monosemantic feature that sparks when the sequence WordLift gets into an open weight model. Now, there is another part of the story, which is recently introduced, that is called NLA. Now, an LLA, it's a translation in natural language of this activation. It's a natural language activation. So you get a model, you get a sequence, which is, your products, your service, your brand, everything that it's at stake for you, your core, okay? And you look at this activation. Then you train another model to translate this network of activation in relationship to the sequence that you have entered, which can be your brand name. And you train it to translate it into natural language so that you know what the machine is actually thinking when it's responding to you. And then you train another model in order to realign the activation that you had from the first model and ensure that the translation from the activation to natural language are precise. So right now, I do this exercise. I was actually doing this for Volkswagen, a car brand. And I was trying to see, what are the different angles and perspective that a model is activating and what is thinking, not what is responding, but what is thinking, when it's responding, what is responding. By doing that, you start to see that there are gaps that you need to fill. Example, Renault, another brand, well-known French brand. They are historical. They are very well known for their heritage, and of course they are French, and they have a very powerful engineering history. However, on the electrical front, on the electrical vehicles, they're kind of new, right? And models don't perceive them yet as credible, especially when compared to other more electrical focused brands like, Tesla or BYD, the new Chinese car manufacturers. So by probing the model, I start to see where we need more information, where at the pre-training level, we need to strengthen the models. And then we look at what data do we have available? Do we have data from our EV research lab that we can make available for training, for helping other people understand how we are developing this technology? Why our engines are so efficient? What is the philosophy of our EV vehicles when compared to Nissan, for example? So I start by probing a model in order to understand how a brand is perceived. And then I analyze the gap on how the brand wants to be perceived. Example, WordLift is about knowledge graph, right? Okay, RDF, Spark, good. It is about SEO, good. What about Agentic AI? Doesn't Spark yet enough, right? So I need to work more on that front. So I need to start looking at what do I have in stock inside the organization that I need to bring up front. That's one process. That's one way of doing this work. There is another way, because Agentic AI is, taking on a lot of tasks and processes, and because none of us really wants, the AI to take decision for us, we need guardrails. And guess what? We do have these guardrails if we look at the data silos inside the organization that no one has considered. Now it's the time. We have gazillions of terabyte of open data that government has been sharing, especially in Europe, over the course of the last 10 years. No one has used this open data. Now is the time to use the open data. Everything that we have, as an organization, can be made available to the AI, whether it's external because we want to create an influence, or it's internal because we want to create a guardrail for an internal process automation.
Right. I think the big problem, I love that entire conversation. That was brilliant. Oh, one thing I did want to know is, when you were saying sparks, I'm thinking word association. It's like the word association we play as kids and adults, indeed. I say a word to you, what do you think of? What's the first thing that comes to your head?
It is similar, but a spark is really an activation of a monosemantic feature. So a monosemantic feature can be brought as a concept, like the Golden Gate was in the original Anthropic paper, a monosemantic feature. We would call it an entity in the symbolic AI world. We will call it an entity, but reality is that it is a neuron that can only take one meaning. Now, inside a network, a lot of the neurons have multiple meanings because we have a certain amount of fixed parameters and we have to store a lot of information. So it happens that there are connections that have to hold, I don't know, a JavaScript function and a word in French and then something else. There are instead connections that are monosemantic that only activate one concept at a time. These are the monosemantic feature inside the neural net. These are the sparks. So these are activation that only open that door.
Okay. Right.
And
okay. So
this is
brilliant.
Interesting because for example, in a brand, some concepts are monosemantic. For WordLift right now, if I look at Gemma, the Gemma 2 model, it is about RDF and SEO. There are a lot of other stuff that move around these, but the only monosemantic features are these two. So these are the strongest, connection that the model has when we speak about WordLift.
Brilliant. Okay. And so talking of structured data, WordLift, that's your big thing, is structured data. You organize internal knowledge graphs, structure the data, and empower the business to use that data internally and externally. That's about it, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what are the strategies for businesses to use to build their own internal knowledge graph and use it for those two different approaches?
Yeah, I think knowledge engineering is how we call it, and it's an art. It is not it's not really a science. It is an art. In fact, you might like these, but most of knowledge engineers are also musicians.
Me too.
Yes,
and you.
Exactly. So why is an art? Because in order to build your semantic layer, you need to express meanings by looking at data. So one part of the brain needs to think in terms of tables and unique identifiers and relationships and and databases. Another part of the brain needs to think about business processes and objectives. And when you model a knowledge graph or a semantic data layer, you are exactly doing this because you are materializing data that already exists that needs to be shaped around a business need. So, for example, when I'm buying this product, and I need to know, for example, what are the products I could buy, when I'm buying this product. And so how do I get this data? Maybe I have customer reviews, and so I can work and mine these customer reviews to understand what is bringing people to buy this product rather than the other product. What is the context where they're buying this product or the other product? And so we build a context graph, which is the reason why things are happening. And we want to do this because an AI agent needs to understand, this level of semantics in order to provide accurate response.
Brilliant. Super. So at the end of the day, you have a lot of data in your business. You need to organize it. You need to structure it. And then you can start to use it internally and externally for your content creation, for serving your clients, but also for feeding the engines.
And it works bottom up, right? In the 70s, it was top down. So you are the CEO and you have to think strategically about what is the semantics of it. No, that's all wrong. You start pay as you go. You start small and you say, okay, I want to sell more shoes and use structured data, or I need to write, a new product guides because the one that I have are outdated, or I need to understand, why competition is better than me in this specific area. So you start with the use case, and you model the data by looking at what is available and what an AI would need as a memory layer. That's how you think.
That's a brilliant last sentence. Thank you so much, Andrea. That was absolutely brilliant. Thank you, everyone. Keep watching. Kalicube Summit continues today, and the rest of the day will be absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Andrea. See you all soon.